Part 1. The Grip on the Land Story. 1. The Last Independent Farmer. The rumble of Dale's old pickup was a familiar sound on the rural roads of Harmony County, a sound that spoke of a life lived in rhythm with the land. But today, the engine's growl seemed to echo the turmoil in his gut. His weathered hands, calloused from years of working the soil, tightened around the steering wheel. He stared out at the sprawling fields of uniform green, an almost alien landscape compared to the diverse patchwork of crops his father and grandfather had cultivated. The air hung heavy with the smell of chemical fertilizer, a stark contrast to the rich, earthy scent he remembered from his childhood. Now it smelled sterile, synthetic, a monument to efficiency, not life. "It ain't about just corn, Mr. Henderson," Dale grumbled, his voice rough as the bark of the ancient oak that stood sentinel at the edge of his property. "It's about freedom, my freedom to choose." Henderson, a sharp-suited representative from the corporation, sat beside him in the cab. "Dale, your sentiments are quaint. But the future of farming is in efficiency, in maximizing yield. Our seed, our systems, they guarantee that." He gestured at the endless rows of genetically modified corn. "This is progress." Dale snorted, the sound laced with bitterness. Progress? He saw it as a gilded cage. Corporations' contracts dictated everything. What seeds he could buy, what chemicals he had to use, and even who he could sell his harvest to. The profit margins were razor thin. He remembered his grandfather's stories of thriving on this land, of being his own boss. Now he felt like a cog in a giant machine, a faceless drone in a system that cared nothing for the land or the people who worked it. He thought of his daughter, Sarah, bright and ambitious, with a fierce spirit and a love for the land. The thought of her inheriting this struggle twisted his heart. The meeting ended with Dale refusing to sign the latest contract. Henderson's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. "You'll come around, Dale. They all do. There aren't many options left." As Dale drove home, the setting sun casting long shadows across the fields, he felt a profound sense of loss. He wasn't just losing his livelihood, he was losing a way of life, a connection to the land that had sustained his family for generations. Story 2. The Seed Patent Lawyer. Martha, a young, idealistic lawyer with a fire in her belly and a passion for justice, worked for a small non-profit that defended farmers against corporate lawsuits. She spent her days battling powerful agribusiness companies. She'd seen firsthand the devastating impact of seed patents on farmers like Dale. Farmers who for centuries had saved and replanted seeds were now being sued for violating patent laws, sometimes for trace amounts of patented genes found in their fields. She felt the injustice of it deep in her bones. "It's David and Goliath," she told her colleague Javier one evening. "These farmers are being crushed by a system that's rigged in favor of corporations. They're not criminals, they're just trying to make a living, to feed people." Javier, a seasoned attorney, sighed. "I know, Martha. It's not just about the patents themselves, it's about the power they represent. The corporations control the seeds, and if you control the seeds, you control the food supply." Martha felt the weight of that control. It wasn't just about legal battles. It was about the future of farming, the future of food, the future of communities. The work was exhausting, the victories few and far between. But Martha refused to give up. She believed that the law could be a tool for justice, that even against overwhelming odds, it was possible to fight for a better, more equitable food system. Part 2. The Industrial Food Machine. Story 3. The Meatpacker's Daughter. Maria Esperanza grew up in a small town in rural Nebraska, a town dominated by a massive meatpacking plant. The plant was the lifeblood of the community, providing jobs, but it also cast a long shadow over everything. Her father worked there. She knew the plant like the back of her hand. The deafening roar of the machinery, the pungent metallic smell, the endless lines of carcasses. She'd seen the toll the work took on her father, the long hours, the back-breaking pace, the injuries that were often ignored, the way his body and spirit were slowly worn down. Maria was determined to get out, to go to college, to escape the cycle of poverty and hard labor. She saw education as her ticket to a different life, but she never forgot where she came from. She saw the health consequences of the industrial food system in her patients, the obesity, the heart disease, the diabetes, all too often linked to the cheap, processed meat that was the town's main product. When she visited home, she saw the same struggles. The plant provided jobs, but it also extracted a heavy price, both in terms of human health and the environment. Maria felt a deep ambivalence. She loved her community, but she hated what the meat-packing industry had done to it. She wanted to advocate for a more sustainable and just food system, one that valued both people and the planet. Story 4. The food scientist. David was a food scientist, a brilliant young researcher with a passion for innovation. He had stars in his eyes when he landed a job at a large corporation that developed new food products. But he soon discovered that the reality of the corporate food world was far more complex and morally ambiguous than he had imagined. The bottom line was always profit, and nutrition often took a back seat. He was assigned to a project to develop a new line of value-added snacks, essentially processed foods loaded with sugar, salt, and artificial flavors. He felt a growing unease, knowing that these products were contributing to the growing epidemic of childhood obesity. He raised his concerns with his supervisor. "David," his supervisor said, "we're not a charity. We're a business. Our job is to give the consumers what they want." David felt trapped, a growing sense of disillusionment settling over him. He began to look for other options, to explore ways to use his skills to create healthier, more sustainable foods. Part 3. The Consumer's Crossroads. Story 5. The Single Mother. LaToya worked 2 jobs to support her 2 young children, Keisha and Jamal. Time and money were always tight. She wanted to feed her kids healthy meals, but it was a constant struggle against the odds. The fast food restaurants were everywhere, their brightly colored signs beckoning with the promise of cheap, convenient meals. The grocery store shelves were filled with processed foods, often cheaper per calorie than fresh fruits and vegetables. She felt like she was constantly making compromises, sacrificing nutrition for affordability. She worried about her children's health, about the long-term consequences of a diet heavy in processed foods. LaToya, however, was not one to give up easily. She started attending community workshops on healthy eating and budgeting. She discovered a local farmers market that offered fresh produce at affordable prices. She began to make small changes, substituting water for sugary drinks, cooking more meals at home, and teaching her children about healthy eating. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks along the way. But LaToya was determined to break the cycle, to create a healthier future for her children. Story 6. The health-conscious influencer. Ethan was a popular health and fitness influencer with a large following on social media. He had a carefully crafted image of perfect health and well-being. But behind the carefully curated posts, Ethan struggled with his own contradictions. He accepted sponsorships from food companies that sold processed foods, sugary drinks, and unhealthy snacks. He knew that many of his followers looked up to him. He felt a growing unease about promoting products that he didn't truly believe in. One day, he received a message from a young follower who was struggling with an eating disorder. Ethan was shaken to his core. He realized that his actions had consequences. Ethan decided to make a change. He cut ties with the companies that sold unhealthy products. He began to use his platform to advocate for a more honest and transparent food system. He learned that true influence wasn't about selling products or projecting an image of unattainable perfection. It was about empowering people to make informed choices. Part 4. The Fight for the Future of Food. Story 7. The food justice activist Maria Rodriguez was a tireless advocate for food justice. She worked in underserved communities, the places where poverty and lack of access created food deserts, where fast food and processed foods were the only options. She organized community gardens, ran food banks, and lobbied for policies that would support local farmers and promote sustainable agriculture. "It's a human rights issue," she would say. "Everyone has the right to access healthy food, regardless of their income or zip code." Maria faced many challenges, but she never gave up hope. She believed in the power of people to make a difference. Story 8. The Regenerative Farmer. Samuel was a young farmer with a vision, a deep connection to the land, and a commitment to doing things differently. He was a practitioner of regenerative agriculture, a system of farming that focused on building soil health, promoting biodiversity, and sequestering carbon. He had learned from the mistakes of the industrial food system. He wanted to heal the land, to create a farm that was both productive and sustainable. He faced many challenges. Regenerative agriculture required more labor and different techniques than conventional farming. It was often more difficult to compete with the cheap prices of industrial food. But Samuel was determined to prove that there was another way. He sold his produce at local farmers' markets, building relationships with his customers. He became an advocate for regenerative agriculture, sharing his knowledge and experience with other farmers and consumers. He was part of a growing movement of farmers who were reclaiming their connection to the land and creating a new vision for the future of food. These interwoven stories illustrate the complex and interconnected ways in which corporations control what we eat in the USA. They show the human cost of this control, but also offer a message of hope, highlighting the resilience and determination of those who are fighting for a more just and sustainable food system. These stories illustrate how corporate control impacts our food system, from struggling farmers and exploited workers to consumers facing limited healthy choices. Yet they also highlight the resilience of individuals fighting for change. Lawyers, activists and farmers, all striving for a more just and sustainable food future.